Where did Jesus go for 18 years? And why does Christianity refuse to discuss the answer? From age 12, when he astounded the temple teachers in Jerusalem with his wisdom and understanding, until approximately age 30, when he emerged to begin his public ministry, the Gospel accounts maintain complete silence. 18 years of absolute mystery in the life of the most influential figure in Western civilization. Does this seem strange to you? Here stands someone whose every teaching and action would be examined, recorded, and studied for 2,000 years. Yet nearly 2 decades of his development remain completely undocumented. What transformation occurred during this period that prepared this remarkable young man to speak with such authority that multitudes followed him? The silence begins to make sense when we understand what those 18 years contained. If Jesus achieved Christ consciousness through spiritual development, then documenting that process would show others could potentially follow the same path. But if Christ consciousness represents an exclusive divine gift, rather than something humans can achieve, then the process becomes inconvenient to record. Which interpretation serves institutional power better? A Jesus who reached divine consciousness through dedicated spiritual practice, or a Jesus whose divine nature was inherent and unrepeatable? The answer exposes why certain truths remain buried in theological silence. Consider what the word Christ meant before 2,000 years of institutional interpretation clouded its original significance. The Greek Christos translated the Hebrew Meshiach, both meaning anointed one. Before the Greek translation existed, ancient Egyptians used KRST to describe one who had undergone the ultimate spiritual transformation. In their tradition, KRST indicated the completion of awareness development that their wisdom schools taught systematically. When I examine this etymology, something becomes undeniably clear. Christ was never intended as someone's surname, but as a title describing a level of awareness that anyone could theoretically achieve through proper understanding and practice. But wait. Allow me to challenge this perspective for a moment. If Christ consciousness requires such extensive development, how do we reconcile this with the Christian teaching that Jesus was divine from birth? The resolution comes through recognizing that divine potential and its expression represent different aspects of the same reality. A seed contains the entire tree within its structure, but specific conditions must unfold for that potential to manifest fully. Similarly, divine awareness may be your essential nature as a soul, while still requiring conscious cultivation to express completely. The Council of Nicaea, in 325 CE, manipulated the answer to this exact question. When Emperor Constantine gathered those bishops from all over the world, they confronted a decision that would determine the future of human spiritual evolution. Should Christ consciousness be understood as an exclusive divine nature belonging to one man, or as a universal potential that others could awaken within themselves? The Arians argued that Jesus achieved his divine status through spiritual development. They maintained that Christ consciousness represented an attainable level of enlightenment for you as a soul. But when the council ruled against this position, they effectively cut humanity off from recognizing its own divine inheritance. Here comes an uncomfortable question, though. If thousands of saints and sages across cultures have achieved states of awareness virtually identical to what Christians attribute exclusively to Jesus, why do we continue pretending that Christ consciousness remains beyond human reach? The documented cases are overwhelming. Hindu tradition speaks of countless Jivan Muktas, beings who achieved complete freedom while embodied. Buddhist texts describe thousands of Buddhas, each representing full awakening. Sufi literature documents hundreds of saints who achieved the highest levels of spiritual realization. But Orthodox Christianity views their claims with suspicion rather than recognition. Why this resistance to acknowledging that others have achieved the same essential realization that Jesus demonstrated? From direct knowledge, I can state that awareness itself possesses infinite capacity for expansion and realization. The same consciousness through which you understand these words contains the same essential nature that Jesus embodied completely. The difference lies not in the fundamental structure of awareness, but in the degree of identification with limitation. When you as a soul recognize your own infinite nature, when awareness knows itself as the ground of all existence, this represents what the ancient world meant by becoming the Anointed One. The path Jesus walked during those 18 missing years involved the same fundamental process that every authentic spiritual tradition has mapped: purification of awareness, illumination of understanding, and divine union. Purification removes the patterns that obscure your essential nature. Consider it like cleaning a mirror. The mirror remains perfectly reflective, regardless of how much dust accumulates. Similarly, you as a soul remain perfectly divine, regardless of how many identifications have accumulated over lifetimes. Divine union represents the stabilization of that recognition in all circumstances. At this stage, there exists no experience of separation between individual awareness and universal awareness. Yet the capacity for individual expression remains intact. But here comes another challenge. If Christ consciousness can be achieved through human effort, does this eliminate the need for divine grace? The apparent contradiction dissolves when we recognize that grace and effort represent two aspects of the same movement within awareness. Divine grace provides the essential support without which no genuine transformation could occur. Personal effort creates the conditions through which that grace can operate effectively. From the absolute perspective, you as a soul are already perfect and complete. From the relative perspective, this recognition typically requires systematic preparation and practice. Jesus represents the perfect integration of these two levels of understanding. His achievement was not unique in its essential nature, but in its complete perfection and historical impact. The process begins not with future attainment, but with present recognition. The awareness you seek to develop is the same awareness through which you are seeking. The Christ you hope to become is the consciousness that is already understanding these words, already questioning these ideas, already sensing the truth that lies beyond all concepts. When Jesus declared, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he pointed toward this immediate availability of divine awareness. When he said, "These things that I do, you shall do also," he confirmed that the same potential exists within you as a soul. Christ consciousness awaits not your worthiness, but your willingness to discover what you have always been beneath the accumulation of thoughts, emotions, and identifications that constitute your sense of separate selfhood. The position of Christ represents not an external achievement, but an internal recognition. The same recognition that Jesus achieved during those 18 missing years remains available within your own direct experience as a soul. Not as future possibility, but as present reality, temporarily obscured by the habit of believing yourself to be something less than infinite awareness itself. The question that remains is not whether Christ consciousness can be achieved, but whether you are prepared to undertake the same kind of inner work that its recognition requires. That work begins now, in this moment, through the willingness to question everything you believe about the limitations of human spiritual potential and your true nature as a soul.